So first of all, I just want to say hello and welcome to today's session, which is going to look at how to create an effective growth strategy. My name is Aisling Conlon, and I am the International Trade Director for UK Advertising. Now, obviously, I'm going to say this, but we believe that marketing communications are an essential part of an export strategy for any brand to be successful. With its pool of diverse skills, global talent, and world-class creative capabilities, the UK communications industry is equipped to support brands, whether small or large, to win new customers the world over. We summarize this by saying that UK advertising is not just your gateway to Britain, but it's your gateway to everywhere. Now, before I hand over to our fantastic speaker, Matthias Gray, who is Global Strategy Director at Freedman Insights, I'm just going to quickly cover some housekeeping, which is going to ensure that you get the most out of this session. So Matthias is going to do his presentation. We know that you're all going to have questions that you want to ask him. So we kindly ask that you use the chat function for questions only. Do not wait to the end of the presentation to put your questions through. Put your questions in as they come. And then at the end of the session, I will pose as many questions as we can to Matthias. Secondly, a reminder that this session is being recorded and we will make it available to you all after International Trade Week is over. And lastly, we kindly ask that you make sure you remain on silent as this is a recorded webinar. So once again, delighted to have you all join us for this session. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Matthias.
Great, thanks for the introduction. As I said, I'm Matthias Gray, working for Freedman International. We're an insight-driven localization agency based here in London, but with global reach to an extensive network of collaborators around the world. We're working with big brands like Meta, Fitbit, etc., basically rolling out their international campaigns across multiple markets, but organized from a central London hub. But enough of that. Let's go into the session. So I've got a few slides prepared. Question is how to create an effective growth strategy using the not so secret power of marketing communications. And as it is Halloween today, I thought I'd start with a horror story, a flashback from the past. So as you might have guessed from my accent, I'm German, and I do remember this story well from my childhood days. So Walmart, one of the biggest retailers in the world, obviously went on a massive global expansion drive in the early 90s, and the German market with its huge size and its huge potential was one of the targets for them. So what Walmart did, they went into the market in 1996, stayed in the market for 10 years, departed the market in 2006 with a loss of 1 billion, really failing to address the German shoppers, massive reputational issue, obviously a lot of redundancies, and they never made it back to the country, which is one of the biggest markets in the world. So why is that the case, and why shouldn't we avoid any of their mistakes, and what can we learn from Walmart? So I think it comes all down to one key point. So Walmart, again, like very big brand, they approached the German market with a simple copy and paste approach. You call it ignorance, or you can call it arrogance, but basically leaving their home market. They just took their best practices that worked in one market and just put them into another market, hoping for the best that it would work. The issues were really like an over-reliance on the brand's strength abroad. So the Walmart brand wasn't very well known in Germany at all. If people knew the Walmart brand, they had negative perceptions. It's an American brand. They didn't really know much more about the brand, and Walmart didn't address that at all through communications, PR exercises, or anything that would really build an understanding of the brand with the local consumer. And they completely ignored the local market conditions and the competitive field, which is a cardinal sin, not understanding what you're getting into and how active the competitors were. There's a low price segment in the German market that completely outpriced Walmart, which sold itself as the low price brand going into the market. But one of the biggest problems they really faced was that they didn't acknowledge any of the cultural differences between Germany and the US or other markets as well. Very visible issues. They adopted the greeter at the door, and as a German, I know this is very awkward for someone being at the door, being welcomed to a shop, friendly faces, smiling. We don't do that. It just didn't go down very well. There was a morning session with the internal team or with the staff where they had all to shout Walmart, and just applying those American principles to the German market didn't go well down at all. And on top of that, their communication was just not up to scratch. They just applied their Mary-centric advertising internally to staff. Communication was pretty negative. They didn't recognize the value that unions can bring to the company, and they didn't address any issues at all to the public and to the press. So basically, copy and paste approach that spectacularly failed, and throughout the process also didn't improve. So what can we learn from this? I mean, one of your best assets when you expand globally really is your brand. There's a really good report from Kantar, the brands report, that puts a number on your brand equity on top of your financial value of your company. And it shows that brands that are strong, that really take care of their brand equity, deliver superior shareholder returns and are more resilient when they're growing across multiple markets. But it's not just about a strong brand, it's about how you apply this brand in market and how you address the local consumer. So brands that are culturally in tune with the local consumer and the local culture win. Really groundbreaking piece of research from the Association of National Advertisers clearly states that culturally relevant ads are 2.7 times more likely to drive a purchase. And the mindset in marketing itself has evolved over the last years from just going global, seeing as something that I can copy and paste or not necessarily acknowledge for those multicultural differences. Brands like Procter & Gamble, and here's a statement from Marcus Pritchard, the Chief Brand Officer, really state this as multicultural marketing may be the single biggest source of market growth in our industry now and for the next several years, perhaps even decades. So there's a shift in thinking and the way how expansion is being approached with marketing. So how to get it right? What I will do now is I walk through 3 key steps, a communications framework, if you want, with a few tasks and objectives and goals that a company will need to go through to really unlock that international growth opportunity. The first one should be an obvious one, but it is not, is assessment. You need to know your markets. And that comes down to a few aspects, really. First and foremost, the market and the category. Proper diagnosis and prioritization is absolutely critical. You need a robust picture of the local conditions in market that is based on evidence, which Walmart, in fact, didn't do. So what we recommend to companies is that they do their core homework, like build this market intelligence, assess the basics, like economic outlook, population distribution. Where are the people you want to sell to? Are there any regional difference? Are there societal dynamics? Is urbanization an issue? If you're a brand that needs to be in an urban environment, you need to know where to sell and where to place your media. You need to understand how your brand is doing. Going into a new market likely means that awareness of your brand is relatively low, and maybe you have already, or you're already being known to a degree, but you've got a challenge that's further down the funnel. So across different markets, you'll likely have different challenges. So make sure you know exactly what is the challenge in each of the markets. Assess the marketing strategy of the competition. There's a lot to learn from local competitors, and we've just done a big piece of work for the biggest hiring platform in the world, and it showed some clear avenues in, and it also showed how strong the competition was. So being aware of that and addressing the competition or the competitive field in the right way is really, really important. And lastly, regulation. Get smart about local advertising rules. In France, for example, showing alcohol or alcoholic products is an absolute no-go in advertising or really, really restricted to a few scenarios. So even if you're not an alcohol brand, but you've got a scenario in your ad where there is a bottle of wine and it works in 3 countries, the local regulator in France will not allow this through. So being smart about those rules is absolutely critical. Audience. Well, clearly you can't grow without an audience with purchase power, and people are different everywhere. So your segmentation that might work in one market and you get consumer understanding from one market might or will likely not work in another one. So it's really, really important to, and I use the word empathy here because we're talking to humans, is about understanding your different buyer groups. Like, what are their challenges? Are their challenges different? Are the socio-demographics different across different markets? Building out that segmentation with a multi-market approach and really diving or drilling into those motivations, attitudes, and barriers, because those barriers will likely not be the same across multiple markets. So you've got a really good understanding of how you address these characteristics. And what we say here is as well is often those characteristics can be similar, often they're not. So understanding where you can drive synergies by addressing the same characteristics is really important, as it is about tailoring your message to different motivations, attitudes, or barriers you want to address. Culture. Of course, the consumer itself isn't seen in isolation. So we need to understand what, in fact, shapes consumer behavior. What are those different cultural realities that kind of as a halo sit all around us and that shape the way how we motivate ourselves, how we behave. So from ingrained values, like, I don't know, being a family person or having a strong bond with your social circle, to what is on fleek. And I learned this is the new cool word for cool, apparently, but being really in touch with fast culture, so what's happening right now. So there are a few steps here. Not just don't just build your audience segmentation, but complement this with a cultural map of your audience. And we saw that Walmart failed spectacularly in this area. So it's really about identifying those tribes and their values, identify cultural moments you might want to align yourself with. Cadbury, obviously a very traditional, well-known brand. This is a picture from their recent Diwali ad. They understand that cultures are very different. They understand that there's a huge opportunity in utilizing those cultural moments. A Diwali celebration, for example, is a valid celebration for the product celebration. So why not? So identifying those cultural themes and those cultural moments is really, really critical to build a really strong connection with people in market that goes beyond just the functional benefits, about emotion and about understanding the context of which people live in and how they feel and how they motivate themselves. And it can power really, really strong creative ideas. Point 2, adapt. So good understanding, obviously absolutely crucial to driving any informed decision. But going global means that what works in one market will likely not work in another market. And where it works, it might still need some kind of degree of modification, adaptation. So modification of your communications and other aspects of your brand is central, of course, to cater to local market needs, and it will increase that level of relevance you're really going for. So the first thing to look at here really is your brand. Your brand must be your audience's North Star. You want to be remembered for the right reasons locally, while, and that's really important, being consistent globally. Of course, you've got your brand and your brand essence. When you're starting in a origin market, it might be more tailored towards your origin market. So there's a question, will it work in other markets? So reviewing your brand's strengths and internationalizing the brand is a really, really critical step. Is the positioning working locally? Are your proof points and reasons to believe valid in market? Because if your narrative doesn't add up and it doesn't really solve an in-market consumer problem that you're really aiming to trying to solve, of course, it doesn't work. So what's your global brand narrative beyond your home market? Or if you're already in multiple markets, think about how it can stretch across markets. Are there some key messages, some key elements in your brand essence that are true to all the markets? And do you maybe then just need to get a more tailored messaging approach across multiple markets that has the ability to stretch your story in a slightly modified way without, of course, changing the essence of your brand? Is your branding and visual identity right for the local market? This is an example on the right from the Just Eat group. They operate across many, many markets under different sub-brands. But as you can see here, and the logo is the same, the colors are the same. So what they've done really well is they use their global wrapper, their global visual identity, but leverage the brand power of their local brands. Of course, they were a brand that grew through acquisitions, so they're kind of sitting in between the chairs. But what they managed well is to have a globally consistent visual identity that still has local expressions or a degree of local elements. Platforms, products, and services. Did you know that 75% of the world's population doesn't speak English at all? It's quite a staggering number. And equally, customer journeys and shopper behavior vary, of course, dramatically between markets. I've been working a lot with tech brands, big platform brands. And for them, of course, they got one service, one platform that is rolled out globally. But there's the question, how can you make that more relevant for the consumer across different markets? And Netflix really is, in fact, one of the best examples to explain that. What Netflix are doing, they've got internationalization built in by design, I would say inherently by design. So if you go to the Netflix platform in Spain or Mexico or France or another country, maybe in Asia, probably not in Asia yet, but the experience is different. The core platform is the same, the functionality is the same, but the language is different, the content you're being served is different, and the algorithm recognizes where you are, and it is the content or whatever is being shown within that platform is tailored to your local needs and your local wants. So that's what we define as internationalization. It goes way beyond just translating it, but really designing an experience that works for a specific locale. And then, of course, you can extend that to other touch points. I mean, Oxxo is one of the biggest local retailers in Mexico. And Netflix does a lot of experiential activity or activations to drive attention for their IPs, their intellectual properties, such as Stranger Things. But you basically need to understand how people navigate through the consumer journey, how that is different across different markets, and then identify the needs for your product, service, and platforms to cater to that journey. And that might also mean that the type of information you want to present on a product or packaging might need to change. Some colors or visual codes might not be understood in other markets. We did a big piece of research for a pharma client recently, and there were significant differences between different markets in terms of the level of reassurance people want to see on the pack. So presenting more information, more factual information about the product on it versus other markets might be one of the modifications you need to consider. So it's about really internationalizing a specific product, service, or platform to an international audience. Campaigns and communications. So you've got your brand sorted, we've got the platform sorted, now you need to communicate it. And this really is about making an emotional connection with people. This is the opportunity to drive memorability, awareness, and of course familiarity with your products. And what we do here, we work with a lot of clients in this area, is about localizing. So we've got a global campaign coming out of a big brand. Let's say the HelloFresh example here. The box is the same. They roll it out across multiple markets. Of course, it's all translated, but it's complemented by one big campaign, and it's one push globally, because that drives efficiencies. But the way how the campaign is run, it's not just about translation. It's about how you add more meaning underneath your hero creative. And HelloFresh is pretty smart about this. When you see an ad in Germany, their key message really is about sustainability. Their Australian ad is about choice. So the key selling point for HelloFresh in Australia is choice. In the UK, it's all about price. However, the core ad and the core assets and the core creative idea on the platform are the same. But underneath, they modified their messaging and their ideas to meet local markets. There's also another point here, is about the casting, the language, and the cultural meaning. So if you believe you've got a very international cast, or a cast that ticks off your, let's say, diversity and inclusion box in one market, that might not be reflective of another market. Again, that difference between America and some of the European markets is quite significant. America is a very large Hispanic minority group, obviously other groups as well. And if you go into the European market, France, Germany has a big Turkish minority, you will need to show very different people in the ad. Just the example here, which I quite like as well, is the Heinz example. Is built nicely. It's like tap into local culture to supercharge creativity. Is really, really neat. Is the thobe is obviously this white dress that's very popular, or that is the dress of the Middle East. And of course, it's a white dress, and it's kind of linking neatly back to this kind of product truth about the Heinz tomato ketchup, that it can stain. So they came up with this idea of an unstainable thobe. You could run the same campaign with different types of clothing in other markets, but it's a really nice, neat, smart way of building creativity on the back of a local cultural feature or characteristic. Number 3. So we've got the basics right, we've modified, now we can accelerate. And this is really about putting the basics into place, laying out the rules of engagement when going into multiple markets. And the first most important thing, and this is more foundational activity that needs to be conducted, is about the global to local model. If you're starting in one market, then of course this is something that's new for you, like if you're just leaving your origin market. If you're already in multiple markets, you might want to consider the balance of the different elements in this model. So what it basically means is that there are two extremes, right? There's a completely globalized approach, which is fully about standardization. You run from a central team, may it be in the UK, and everything is the same across every market. The completely other extreme is localization, or autonomy, if you want, so lack of central control, where field teams, field marketers operate completely independent from your global brand. And neither of those, in our experience, is the best approach. It is more likely a mix that works best for your company, and we see a 70-30 mix between global and local as a mix that has benefits towards efficiencies in terms of central management, effectiveness of advertising, of course, but on the other hand, being able to be culturally close to the consumer. So you create a degree centrally, and then your local teams can take parts of the assets, can take some of your communication or a creative idea, build on it, but utilize centrally created assets, centrally created communications, deploy them in marketing, complement them with fitting local local ideas or local executions. So the balance here, I think, is something that every company needs to decide for themselves, need to build up for themselves based on what works best. But a mix of both approaches seems to be a sensible way when growing globally. Enable top-down and bottom-up structures. To me, that means it's not about central teams dictating what happens in market, but I've worked with global brands where they had very little knowledge about what their local teams were doing. And there were some amazing ideas and some amazing campaigns coming out of the local markets. So the team was sitting in Germany, but the Romanian team, they created some amazing social content, some really smart ideas. So it's also about recognizing what happens on the ground and getting that back up the funnel and maybe utilizing it across multiple markets. This, by the way, where the Share a Coke campaign came from. It was an Australian campaign first, but Coca-Cola recognized this with a global and local approach, surfaced it back up, white labeled it, and rolled it out across all the markets with toolkits for all the markets to activate. So really true global and local approach. And of course, that's complicated to manage. So, I mean, obviously being in a localization agency, but we see how we can enable these companies to deliver better. So procure a supplier network that helps you in this growth or expansion stage. That leads us to the ways of working. So putting guardrails and processes in place is about making life easier for field marketers. This is needed. More markets equal more creative work. Often processes and guardrails can be seen as stifling or blocking people from expressing their own ideas and running with their own thoughts. But in fact, it is about making life easier for everybody. So there are ways of how we can achieve this. Local market playbooks is something that most brands deploy, where you really got your brand strategy written out. It's being deployed across multiple markets. It's very clear to the marketers in market what the global requirements are, what the global strategy is, what the style guide are, but also highlighting what the good practices are across different markets. And if you've got an agency that supports you with like what are good practices in Romania, good practices in France, this is something that can be brought together, consolidated, and rolled out across multiple markets. Of course, more creative work means more assets, so higher volume. You need to consider a higher volume of production, of creative production when you grow. It's just multiple markets times multiple language. It adds up quickly. This is why like digital asset management, workflow tools become really, really important. So marketing technology, you might want to consider different tools that help you make things easier. Of course, clear roles and clear processes from sign-offs, etc. These are all things that are absolutely central to any global operation, making sure that teams are informed, teams can feedback, sign-offs are taken by the right people, content is being distributed to the right people at the right time, campaigns go live at the right time, and assets are available when people need them available in the market. Attribution, just quickly on that, this is something we see is often an afterthought, which it shouldn't, of course, because you've got your business strategy, your business objectives, which translate into a marketing strategy which has clear global objectives or clear global goals you want to achieve. But of course, that needs to break down into specific markets and into specific market performance. So you need to see what works and what doesn't across multiple markets, and you need to bring back this knowledge into the central platform. You can learn from one market what works well, and you might want to then apply this to other markets. So multi-market tracking of your brand and your campaigns and setting the right KPIs in the first place is absolutely important. Similarly, what we see is a creative testing, or what we call culture consultations, where when you create a central idea or central creative platform, rolling this out across multiple markets before you actually start producing those creative assets or those creative ideas. Get a sense check, make sure the idea actually translates, people get it, it's comprehensible, it drives relevance, people are familiar with the concept of a specific campaign, because there's no point producing thousands of assets, wasting all that money if the basic idea of the campaign doesn't work. And lastly, internal culture. Again, I think this is really important. To sell to the world, your team need to be ready for the world. Many companies fail at this. There's an ivory tower view of the world. I would say open the windows, let the world in. And it goes back to the first point, in fact, know your markets. So as a global brand or a brand or an international brand, depending on your model, as soon as you leave your origin market, be aware what's happening around you and embed a culture internally that is global by nature, but also local by nature, that has a clear vision where you want to grow in terms of a global presence that is understood by everybody. At the same time, has opened the windows, let the world in, and acknowledge the diversity of your different markets and avoid bias and counteract potential bias in terms of decision-making with diverse thinking. So an inclusive workforce will bring the world to you, which helps, of course, from an internal perspective to then address the world and making sure that the thinking and the perspectives reflect this global approach of a global brand. And that's it for me in terms of presentation.
Thanks very much, Matthias. That was really, really interesting. There's been quite a few questions that have come in, I'll say,
Sure.
direct mail to the two of us. I don't think we're going to have enough time to cover them all, but I'm just going to cherry pick one or two. And I think if anybody didn't get the question asked, I'll drop my email address into the chat and we can I can do some stuff offline for you all as well. But Hilary was in very early. So we will ask her question, but because I thought it was quite a good one. So Hilary is a small company, or a very small company is what she says. And I guess her question was around what did you feel was more important for her brand? Is it her personal brand or her company brand? Which is kind of quite an open question. And we've put you right on the spot.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, especially for companies, small companies, sometimes they're not necessarily seen as two different ones, are they? So, I mean, in terms of international expansion, I would probably say the company brand, of course, is what people see first. So growing that across markets and in different locales, you definitely need to be clear about how you show up, and you need to modify, of course, how you show up in those different markets. And that comes down to like basics, like, of course, the branding, does it work? Is the product not just right for the market, but what you might need to change there? So the company brand in that sense does play an important role. But at the same time, of course, if you can lend your personal brand strength and your personality to the brand and amplify that across different markets, then that's a benefit. So I think they go in tandem, to be honest. I would start with, like, if it comes to expansion, we'd start with the company brand. But if you're a strong personality, and we've got the same, again, there's a question: is your personal brand as strong in other markets as it is in the UK? I think then that's the second part to that.
And just off the back of that, is there a good example of maybe a UK leader who has a really strong personal brand that you would kind of recommend that maybe people want to even just follow as a good example of someone who's got their personal brand right? Because I mean, there's one or two I can think of, but
I mean, what comes to mind directly is of course Branson and Virgin. you can argue, is that the best? Is he the best personal brand? I think it depends a little bit on your perspective. But of course, Virgin again can't really be seen without Branson. So I mean, Virgin has grown massively internationally with Virgin Atlantic, all the different types of products. And the way how they approach the world. I mean, Virgin Atlantic, if you go to the website, the platform is all internationalized. And what Branson obviously does really well is he shows up across different markets in talk shows, in thought pieces, in the local industry media, and he adds his credibility and his charisma, I would say, to the brand narrative. He just humanizes the brand. So I think in that sense, he does really work well as a testimonial for the brand, if you want, obviously the founder. So I think he's a good example of basics right, grow internationally, build your business internationally, but as an Englishman, he's English, right?
Yes.
Not making a dramatic mistake here, right?
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I threw that other one on you, but it's always good to give another example along with that. We have two questions that have come in from Andrew. So sorry, Andrew, I'm going to have to cherry pick one. But Andrew, you had a comment around B2B, and what I'd love to do is pick up with you after this around, because that's another session that we'd love to host for some people. But there is a question that I get asked a lot as well, so I'm going to throw it to you. But Andrew asked, is it better to have a local person in market or have your own expertise do the research for you?
You mean in terms of a central insights function?
I'm guessing so, because this came quite early on in your slides as well.
I think that really boils down again to a question of, like, do you have, I mean, I would say the central function does work well in terms of efficiencies. If you only have, I mean, if you've got multiple markets, this decision is easier. If you just got one other market, it might be slightly different. But if you operate across multiple markets, and in each of those markets, you want to hire someone to do the insight work or your research work, that gets really, really complicated and really, really expensive. Nowadays, thanks to internet and more agile ways, I think it's probably better to run a central function, or like a center of excellence, if you want, where you bundle the knowledge and then you activate across multiple markets, or you have field marketers on the ground that kind of work with you. But the more work intense jobs, or the deeper jobs, I would do centrally. And the way how we work here, maybe as an example, is we've got a hub and spoke model. So we've got a central team with central capabilities that can be replicated across, or basically can work across all the markets, but from a central point. So we bring back the parts of the job we can do here, but then we employ people for some of the tasks or smaller jobs or complementing activities in the market. So there's other spokes that get a brief for a fragment or a part of a bigger job, and they bring this knowledge back to center, which then allows obviously quality control centrally, allows to control the narrative centrally, but you do get the insight or the knowledge or the expertise from the markets. So I guess it's a mix of both, but I would say a centralized model with a degree of outsourcing to local markets.
And I'll say it for you, I'm absolutely certain that's something that Freedman Insights can do for you, isn't that right? Okay, so we've got two more questions. I'm going to go to one from Noreen next. So Noreen says, do you suggest having different language social media? I think it's supposed to be all running from the main account. Sorry, I was just reading that. So yeah, would you have one social media account where you would run different things across different languages? I mean, obviously I think it's going to matter on the market, but if we're looking at kind of mainstream markets, I think for this question is probably the easiest way.
Yeah, I mean, what depends. There are two elements to this. First and foremost, I think there's a technological element to this. What Facebook, of course, allows you to do is to have one one site or one URL, or like if your company name, basically it's one what's called like one profile, but it is geofenced, so wherever you come from, so you can create locales, and then you're still at like facebook.com/ I don't know, let's say Quechua, but wherever you come from, you'll get served a local version. So of course that then can be in different languages, but it's still the same page. The other element to this, I think, is really a question of culture and language. If the markets are really important to you, they're big, then they deserve attention. And I think it's about respecting, we call it respect cultures. If you're going to France, you will have issues if your content is in English, because people will not understand it necessarily. You might alienate a specific segment of your audience as well. So there's a simple comprehension question here, and also culturally, if you create for the market like bespoke content, original content, of course that resonates well. And again, it's not as black and white. So a lot of bigger companies, in fact, either they're saying like we're 100% global, so this is our global channel, it's all in English. This is global content, but that's very generic and very neutral in its creative. Then they might have sub-profiles with per locale, and they're fully localized. Or another strategy is, of course, you've got like a global channel that is, say, like localized for specific locales, but some of the content you can still use the same imagery, just change the language of the copy around it or the descriptions. So that's a smarter approach where that's possible. And then maybe complement this with 20% locally originated content. So ideally, I would say it's probably a balance of like central assets, your central narrative that gives you consistency as well, but plan it with a potentially different language overlays, etc., or different casting. I mean, it's so easy to swap people out in Photoshop these days just to match the demographics of a market. Yeah. Long answer.
If I take it another step further, just based on the response that you've just given, if I am, let's just say, an SME, and I am now about to start, or I'm on the kind of the first steps of my global journey in terms of those social media channels, this probably sounds like a bigger question than I mean it to be, but what would you say that I do now as a kind of start for 10 before I sort of engage with a bigger brief or anything? Do I start to just look at what those markets are that I might want to be and what the tone of voice might be for those markets? Or do we suggest that that is just a job where you actually need to work with a company from the advertising marketing sector? It's probably quite a big challenge to go out there and do it on your own, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the scale of your business, really. But if you're very small, and then you might want to do that yourself. But as soon as you're bigger and you've got a sizable amount of people to cater for and maybe different segments, then it gets very complicated. Or if you're not just launching into one market, but let's do an APAC drive, and that means basically 5 or 6 markets you want to go to, or you expand into 3, 4 different markets that are fundamentally different, then of course that's very difficult to manage. And there are quite a few steps, of course, you need to go through. I mean, it's about what we always say is like really understand your competition, see what they're doing. And if you do that per market, 5, 6 competitors, really good analysis of their messaging, their strategies, then that adds up, of course, to a significant amount. But I guess, I mean, in terms of the actual step, I think it's like, what's your competitive field? What can you learn from those? And then it's the cultural aspects and cultural language aspects. And of course, it's good to have someone to help with this who knows the exact questions to ask or what exactly to look for. But I mean, if you're a smaller business, of course you can start yourself, and you start small and you see what works. It's probably more a bit of a test and learn, which for a bigger company going global isn't really approach, because if you invest that much money, you can't do a test and learn. You need to know it works.
Thank you. So there is more questions coming in, but unfortunately, I think we're gonna run out of time. So to those questions that come in now, we will work with you offline to do our best to get some answers for you on those. So there's one final question which came in from Aaron, which was, as a UK services exporter, how effective is locally targeted SEO campaigns and Google Ads in generating international leads? And we could make that slightly more broader by maybe asking your opinion around the whole sort of SEO and Google Ads, when how you bring that in as part of your export strategy, or if it really is where you need to start, or there's somewhere else you need to start first.
Well, that's a very specific question. I'm not an SEO expert, I would say, but I am a planner. And what I would probably, my answer would be, is of course you need to really understand your audiences first and foremost. You need to understand their journey, and you need to understand what resonates with those consumers. So what are they searching for? And of course, search is absolutely critical for you to understand what is actually what is the people's interests, and what language are they using as well to search for specific products or to solve specific issues. And sometimes, of course, the language you use internally might not actually reflect how people are searching for a problem online, or how they think about a specific topic. So I wouldn't say necessarily SEO. I mean, that's because that's the way of how to solve it, but it's about understanding the terms and the keywords and the language, and the type of queries that your consumers have is of course really, really important, because that then can affect not just your SEO strategy, but it can also impact perhaps other creative activities or other creative activations. So doing a keyword exercise or research piece is important. And I think that's something we do as part of a bigger cultural analysis, is to understand that semantic landscape across different markets.
Thank you. And I know I did throw that one on you.
No worries.
that was one of the ones that came in before we were kind of closing it off. So more questions are continuing to come in, but we will have to close this off for the next session that's going to start. But I do want to just summarize it in a kind of one sentence from what I've picked up. It's very clear that if you are going to go on a global journey, that you are going to need to understand your audience. You're going to need to understand their culture. And by culture, we also include their language. You know, you've heard it from Matthias, there isn't a one-stop shop that will work for each market. There will be reasons why it's successful and not in each market. And I think that no matter what shape or size that you are, some of it you will do on your own, but there will become a point in your global growth journey where you will need to engage with the communications and marketing services industry. And there are, you know, thousands of us that are here and can help you on that journey. During the week, we will be continuing to have conversations around the importance of comms for your export strategy. So we have 2 more sessions coming up. One of those will be looking at China as a market on its own, which is on Thursday. And then we have another one where we are looking, deep diving more into why culture differences need to be at front and center of any of your export strategies. And that will be on Wednesday at 2:30. But if you go to the schedule on the DIT's website, look up the Advertising Association, and you'll be able to find all of our talks this week. If you didn't get your question asked, hang back on the chat. I'm going to put my email address in there and you can contact me directly and I will try and get some answers for you. But lastly, I wanted to say a big thank you to Matthias and give him a round of applause from your desk for kind of doing that presentation for us, which was incredibly insightful for me as well as all of you. But thank you, and we will see you all again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matthias.